us today. Today we're talking about mental health during this pandemic with our guest Deena and therapist Petra Gross, LPC. We always welcome your questions and comments and your experiences, so please put them in the chat box and we will address them as the show goes on. So first, I'll bring on Deena. Deena's a married mom with a son who's 8 years old. She's experienced almost every pandemic hardship that they talk about on the news. And on top of that, she's been dealing with some depression, but mostly anxiety for quite a few years. And so COVID is just icing on that cake. So let me bring in Deena. Hi.
Hi.
Thank
How's
you
it going?
Good, thank you. I guess to start off with, just briefly, what was life like right before the pandemic hit for you?
Just every day. I mean, there was a lot of hustle and bustle. The dropping my kid off at school, waiting in the car line, commuting. I'm in South Florida, so I had a good hour and change commute to Miami every day. And, work and then rush to leave work and rush to pick my son up and then rush to get home and rush to make dinner and do all the laundry. What I imagine life is like for most families,
Mm-hmm.
pretty
Right.
standard, right? Probably.
Yeah, which is great because that's who we're talking to today. It's everybody. And so, what was the first change when the pandemic hit and everything got shut down? What was the first major thing you and your family experienced?
It was kind of cool at first. At first, you go through those waves. So at first I thought, I'll plant a garden. I'm going to grow my own vegetables and fruit, and it's going to be wonderful. And I became so earthy, and everything was green and lush, and it was awesome. And I was baking bread from scratch. And it was just, a totally new world for us. And we had more bonding time. We had a chance to be together as a family more often, which was nice. My husband traveled previously, he traveled a lot for work.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the beginning, it was kind of cool. It was almost like a vacation. And then, you realize, well, I'm kind of secluded. And the people that I'm used to seeing and being around that are outlets for me that I would laugh with at work every day, or the girlfriend I would meet up with, or the play date I would take my son on, none of that's happening. So, reality kind of set in and things got a little more serious after I would say after about 6 weeks. It took a good 6 weeks before the honeymoon wore off with with quarantine,
Right. I think we still kind of expected it to be almost over at that point. So,
Sure.
it's kind of easy to keep going with it because this is a vacation, kind of like you were saying.
Right. It still feels like there are still days where it's like, give it a few more weeks, we'll be back to normal. And it's just the whole experience has been so surreal,
Hmm.
really.
You mentioned feeling isolated from everybody, not being able to you talk to friends and coworkers and things like that. Do you? How did that come out at home? When you're feeling isolated, how did your family know you're down?
I mean, there wasn't really time for anybody to pick up on those hints with me because my husband still has to work and he's still working full time, and my son's trying to figure out virtual schooling, and that's a whole new world in itself. And there wasn't really time for any of that, so it was me. I worked in radio. So I was recording my radio show out of my bedroom closet, and in essence talking to hundreds of thousands of people, but really talking to a white wall every day. So it kind
Mm-hmm.
of messes with your head when your audience is your scarf and your winter coat and your shoes and your purse that's up in the closet. And it did hit me after a couple of months, because like you said, it just kept feeling like this will end soon. And then after a
Mm-hmm.
couple of months, I realized that I felt really down. And I'm not a stranger to depression or anxiety or anything. And it wasn't so much anxiety, it was more depression. Like when will this end? Will this ever end? Having to put on a brave face for my 8-year-old who had a lot of
Mhm.
questions, and my husband who still has to go out and work every day, and wondering when he goes out to work, is he going to bring home COVID? There was just so much uncertainty, and there was so much to worry about for me at that point.
What do you think your biggest worry at that point was? What really made you pick up and say, "Hey, something could really go wrong here"?
Um, Something could really go wrong here. Probably, well, I just every day felt exactly the same. And
Hmm.
to me, that gets dangerous when you feel like you're up against a wall and you can't go anywhere. You can't see the people you're used to seeing, to have that outlet to laugh. I love comedy. I love being around my funny friends. I love, and a phone call during those times. I mean, I'm sure you remember, nobody was hanging out on the phone. Everybody was just trying
Yeah.
to figure out how to get through the day. So that was all gone. And and when every day kind of started becoming the same, I would um, kind of internalize it all. And I found myself for about a week, I would find myself making it through the day and sitting on the couch going, I need a drink. And I was never that person. So I assume lots of people feel the same way or felt the same way. But once I realized that I was thinking that, I caught myself very quickly and I decided I needed another outlet. So for me, exercise, I went on a offer up. I don't know, it's like, used goods. I went on offer up and I found a used piece of gym equipment and we put it in the garage. And that for me, 5 days a week, ever since that day, has been life changing. Because when I start to feel myself just staring at the wall, going, I can go and I can channel that energy into something positive, and it's been really good for me. That and creating, now that people are more vocal and taking the time to connect with their friends more often, I've been creating a lot with my friends, and that's been awesome.
Well, that's a really good idea right there. And it sounds like you have this really pretty picture of having these downturns and then being able to pick yourself back up from them. And so many people wish they were able to do that. You know,
Mhm.
um, it's. Do you think that having to deal with mental health issues like the anxiety and the depression beforehand better prepared you for what you're
Yeah,
going through?
yeah. I mean, I definitely think it's not, this wasn't like my first go around with any of those feelings. So I think
Hmm.
if someone's dealing with it for the first time, it's got to be very confusing. But I had dealt with anxiety and depression since I was probably 13 or 14. So
Hmm.
I knew I can tell when I'm off center, and I can tell when I need to make an adjustment or need to make a change. And I think having that dialogue and communicating with my spouse about it, and him knowing what to look out for, and my family knowing what to look out for, and friends knowing what to look out for, I think that's all really important, you know.
We have a comment. Kara says, I understand completely. I experienced depression. So, people, you're right. People out there, can
For
really identify
sure.
that. And you said at first, both you and your husband were at home, and then he went back to work, and something happened at your work too.
Oh, I lost my job. That wasn't helpful.
No.
Yeah, about 5, almost 6. I think today is actually 6 weeks. Come to think of it, so 6 weeks ago I lost my job, and probably the only thing that was my saving grace in all of that is that I had channeled. Along with exercising, like I said, creating is a really important thing for me.
Hmm.
My girlfriend Crystal and I, she's in Austin, and I'm in South Florida, and we would have these long conversations, just texting at night when we couldn't sleep because we weren't sleeping well, and we would just lay in bed and text. And one night I said, it's nerve wracking. I go outside or I'm, with my son, or we try to run an errand or something. And people still aren't understanding the boundaries, and they're not, and people are still coming really close to us. Like even just going on walks, sometimes people get really close to us, and you don't want to be that person in the beginning, especially. You didn't want to be that person to be like, whoa, buddy,
Right.
And I said to her during one of our conversations, I wish I had a shirt that just said, yo, back up. And she started laughing, and she's a graphic designer. And so she mocked it up as a joke and made the shirt. And I said, I would order that today. And that whole experience snowballed into us creating an apparel line. And had I not had that apparel line, so now fast forward, we have an apparel line 6 weeks later. And if I didn't have that to fall back on, I would certainly be very depressed after losing my job. So it's
Right.
everything. I do feel, and so many people have said during this experience and this ordeal, everything happens for a reason. I think it is not fun to hear that when you're going through it. And sometimes it makes you resent the person that says that to you. But I do think in a way things do happen for a reason. And I think that doors, sometimes you have to, put your hand on the knob. You got to get there. You have to put the work in. Things don't happen for you, organically usually. But I think that in this instance, it did lead me to a better outcome, which is kind of crazy during a pandemic. Not something I ever would have imagined.
Right. I'll just mention you're on Facebook and Instagram as emotional support threads, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you essentially became a stay-at-home mom, and your husband, he had to leave to go to work, right? So he went back to work. So what was that like with him gone during the day, and then how did that affect your sense of security?
Oh, virtual school. So being at home trying to do the virtual school. I just saw you take a big gap. You went, because yes, virtual school in itself, and to any teachers who may be watching, I have no idea how you're doing it. You just turned into IT professionals. You have 10 more hats on top of the hats that you're already wearing. So I thank you for your service. But yeah, virtual school on top of trying to start a business, run a business, find another full-time job, and interview for those while my son needs help, with his standard school stuff. And then my husband having to physically be out interacting with people, and then coming home, I was trying to be supportive and not be a nag. However, like I imagine anybody who's with someone who's in the medical field, when the second that person gets home, you're like, can you take your clothes off outside and boil them? And can you, it definitely heightens the anxiety of what are you going to bring home with you aside from the takeout that we're having for dinner?
Right.
And so that was not good for my anxiety either initially.
How did that affect your son? Like I have this picture in my head of him running to dad and saying, "Hi, Dad, I'm glad you're home," and that really couldn't happen.
No.
Happening right now. So,
No.
so how is your son dealing with all these changes?
It's funny because we know so many people who are dealing with the same type of situation in our neighborhood, and just friends who, one partner has to go out and has to deal with the public, and maybe people who don't feel like wearing masks and interact and stuff, and one who stays home. So he's resilient, and he picked up on it very quickly and understood, let him get undressed in the garage, let him run to the shower, let him take a shower, throw his clothes in the washing machine. We got a system down after a while, and he understood. He's 8, and we definitely have friends who have younger children who are dealing with much more difficult explanations, and I feel fortunate in that sense that he does know kind of what's going on in the world around him. And so it doesn't require the biggest explanation, but we do try to keep a very open line of communication in the house and talk about anything and everything.
We have a comment from Sassy. She says, COVID-19 not only affected my parenting and created a lot of stress, it's really messed with my marriage. Both my husband and I are stressed over money and taking care of the kids 24/7.
Understood. I mean, how could you not be? It's there's no romance. I mean, there's definitely no romance left. I had posted something on social media about how we get to the point one night where I said, I will give you $20 to go in your room, and we made it a game. And I said, I'm going to give you $20 if you go in your room and you hang out. You can camp in there. It's going to be so much fun. You'll have snacks. We'll make it a whole thing. And we ended up paying our son $20 to hang out all night so we could have dinner and we could watch a movie and we could have an adult conversation. And
Right.
Unfortunately, there's not such a budget to continue doing that every week, but man, would I love to. It was an anniversary and we felt like it was well worth the cash.
Right. Right.
I suggest that I had lots of people on social media who were like, you bribed your child to watch himself. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Because it was a very healthy thing for us to be able to have. We had a great time. We had a great adult conversation. He had a blast in his room watching cartoons, doing his thing, and it didn't hurt anybody. And I highly recommend it.
That sounds like a good idea. How do you guys handle the day-to-day? Like, everybody's so stressed and anxious. Have you noticed, does your family have you noticed more inappropriate interactions with each other? Something that
like sniffing at each other, being
yeah.
short with each other stuff. Sure, there's definitely days we're really good at catching ourselves. Like I said, I've dealt with this stuff emotionally. I'm pretty self-aware, and my husband's very self-aware also. And so I think that we're both good at catching, like, hey, what you just said is not cool. And then we can kind of like stop and talk about it. We don't get to the point of disrespect. I've definitely in my younger days was in relationships where there were those moments and there, we would cross those lines, but we don't get to the point of disrespecting each other. I think having those conversations on a regular basis about, oh, your day was awful, huh? Do you need to be alone? Do you need to go hang out in the garage? What do you need to do? And let's buy you some time so you can kind of work through that stuff. We try to get each other what we need when it comes to the event. If I need a shower without my son screaming mommy outside of the door, he will run interference. And it's just a matter of, at first, I think things were so chaotic that they were out of control. And I just think now we're getting used to this stuff. And then something will change in a month. I mean, things keep evolving, and I know that that's happening for everyone. So it's just these are crazy times.
Well, what's one thing you need more of right now?
Hours in the day. I would love to have more hours in the day. I think for me, I am hurting that my son, he's an only child. So it hurts me that he doesn't have the interaction that he needs with other children on a more consistent basis. I feel like I'm failing him in that sense, that, I can't provide that for him. And it's a situational thing and he understands. I think he's less hurt by it than I am. But I definitely have my moments where I feel like I'm failing him because I can't provide, that sibling, or I can't provide that instant playmate for him that I know that he'd like to have.
Well, it's too bad the pandemic can't take away our mom guilt, right?
Nothing will ever take away our mom guilt.
It's always there.
Before, after, we're always going to have it, aren't we?
Jack 38 says, with 3 young children, my wife and I are really struggling. She has depression. I'm angry because I feel like I'm handling more than my share. It's affecting my job and my mental health. So, what do you think? You appear to have everything all together, and a lot of people who deal with heavy bouts of depression and, crazy amounts of anxiety can appear just fine, in front of people. And it's a skill we develop, I believe. But has there been a time during the pandemic, has you and your husband talk all the time? So has he said, hey, look, I don't think you're, are you feeling well? Because I feel like I'm taking on more than my share. Has there been any?
In the beginning, for sure. I mean, I definitely don't want to give off the impression that I have it all together or anything. I think that I think anyone who would say that or portray themselves that way, given the circumstances, especially this year, I think they'd be fooling themselves. But yeah, I mean, there have been lots of moments where it's it's hard to get through the day. Like I said, I would be a wreck right now had I not started my passion project with my girlfriend. I would have no means of income. I would be a wreck. I would have had no outlet. I'm very thankful that I did that, but had I not, I'd be in a very, very rough position. So I definitely don't want to give off the impression like I have anything all together. I don't have things all together. My bedroom door is barricaded. My son, I'm, bribing him with iPad time so I can actually have this conversation. There's nothing perfect in my life in any way, shape, or form. And I get it. Like the struggle and the balance and the nothing's 50-50. I don't think any relationship is 50-50. I think there are, checks and balances, and some days are good and some days are bad for people. And I just think being, in my world, at least, trying to be as self-aware as I can has been the key for that's been the only way that I've survived all of this. It's just being able to say, something's off today. I woke up. I don't want to get out of bed. What's happening? And then forcing myself to look at what's happening. Because you can pick up on those indicators and you can very easily make an excuse about why you don't have time to deal with them. But forcing yourself to deal with that is key also, I think.
I agree. And I think I really appreciate you being on with us today, Deena. And I am really grateful that you found your passion project, and, your family is adjusting on a continuum, I suppose you might say. So
we're trying. Everybody's got the struggle right now, and we're trying. We're doing our best. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Well, sure. And best of luck with your, I just had it in front of me, emotional
support threads.
Yeah. All right, Deena, thank you so much.
Take care.
You too. All right, just to remind everybody, you can share your thoughts and your comments, and we'll address them as we go along. And so if you're just joining us, we just spoke with Deena, and we're about to talk to Petra Gross, LPC. She's a therapist, and let me just bring her on. Let's see here. Hi, Petra. Thank you for being here today.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Sure. Did anything stick out in Deena's story to you? Anything you might want to address?
Everything. I felt every word he said in my soul. And it's somewhat comforting to have, that universal experience, to know that we're all hearing this and we're all in this together. And we're not in the same boat, but we're in the same storm, and we're weathering it the best that we can. And it was nice to just hear, a genuine and a real conversation, and for somebody to just put it out there, like, this is how this is how it is. And it's messy, but we're doing the best that we can to manage it. But I think everybody's dealing with so much. Of course, I too, as I was hearing her, and on top of everything, then she lost her job as well. And wow, how many hurdles a lot of people you just have to jump through in such a short time, because yes, it's been a really long quarantine, or whatever we at this point in time, I don't even know. But when you look at a grand scheme of things, this is not a long time to go through so much. And all the adjustments that we had to do internally and externally, within ourselves and with others, it's been a lot.
Yeah, it has been. What would you say to somebody who is feeling overwhelmed right now? They're a parent and everyone's at home, and maybe somebody has to go out in the virus world. What would you say to them to help them come back to a more even keel? What could they do?
I would say, I see you, I hear you. It's not unusual to feel this way right now. So just to do your best to feel what you need to feel and not run away from it. Because as much as, we want to not feel a certain way, and it's understandable, not facing our emotions can lead to, repression. And then once we press and stuff down our emotions enough, they come out in ways that might not be so pretty. Like Deena was sharing, kind of noticing like, wow, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling something. Let me check in with myself. Let me see what's going on, and do your best to manage that and seek help if needed. And then, to realize that balance in general is not easy to achieve when you're a mom and an employee and a partner and a friend. So all these hats that we're wearing contribute to stress. And then on top of that, you have this pandemic that changes all the dynamics in our lives. And so to give yourself grace, give yourself kindness, forgive yourself for dropping the ball on some things, and just realize that balance will look different every day. Not every day you'll be able to give your 100% to your child, your pet, your partner, your home. Home might not look great every day. Laundry is not going to get done. Some things are just not going to get done. So to attempt to prioritize the best that you can, the things that are important or like must to do, and then take it from there and take it easy on yourself. It would also extend so much more grace and kindness to our friends and understand, their struggles, but then, we expect a lot more from ourselves, and that's not always fair.
Right. Like Deena had mentioned at the beginning, she was baking bread and having all this quality
That
time.
had me rolling.
Yeah, right. And everybody, I think a lot of people were like that. They're like, yeah, let's thing.
Yep.
And then towards the end of the conversation, she said, there's not enough time in the day. And I think we all feel that way. But when we get to slow down a little bit, and maybe be with the family and, do some things we haven't been doing, why all of a sudden are we out of time again?
Right. It is really interesting. I too was attempting to grow vegetables and bake bread. And that's all. I mean, it's definitely, I think at the beginning it seemed like we had so much more time than we usually have. But it's a trick, right? Because our time never changes. We always have the same amount of time in a day. We always have those 24 hours, or how many, depending on how much you sleep. But it's always the same amount of time. It's just when you don't have, like what she was describing, she had almost 3 hours of her day was spent on commuting. So that's 3 hours that she got back that still somehow. And I think we're, as a society, very productivity oriented, very task oriented, complete one thing to the next thing. to the next thing and just kind of keep going and doing. So when we're left to just be, it's a really strange feeling. It's almost like we don't know how to just be, and what does that look like? So I think when we first started filling our time with all these cool activities, at first it felt like I have too much time, so I have to fill it somehow to feel. It's almost like you felt like you need to justify your time. But then, as it continued, and we realized, you can't keep up with, especially that's not your routine. You can't keep up with baking bread and cooking every day and gardening and whatnot. So once you run out of that, then that leaves you again with kind of your own stuff to do. And I think just it seems like it occupies more just mental energy as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that way too. I feel like my, the mental kind of pushes down on me a little more than it did before. Like I have more time to sit there and think, and sometimes that's not so good for me, But
Yeah.
Okay, so one more question. How does somebody just check in with themselves? Just briefly, what does that mean? I'm feeling a certain way and I'm going to ignore it, but you're saying to check in. So what does that mean? How do I do that?
It can be as literal as it sounds, finding, even designating, because I think if we don't intentionally do that, we can just overlook ourselves as we're just doing and just going from one place to the next, doing one thing and the other. We don't we kind of start disregarding our needs. We don't even think about them like, do I really even have needs in a day? Like, it just, your body signals for when you're hungry or when you're thirsty. And even that sometimes we tend to ignore, right? But perhaps be intentional about setting either a time in a day where you can go for a walk, or where you can sit down, and perhaps just ask yourself, how am I doing right now? How am I doing right now? What do I need? What do I need in this moment? And if you identify that you're feeling this, what can I do for myself to feel different? Or what can I do to feel better? So it can be very literal, like I'm having a conversation with myself and I'm going to check in on how am I feeling today.
It sounds a lot more straightforward than I was putting it in my head. So thank you for clearing that up.
Yep.
And thank you for being here today. I've really appreciated your insight, and I hope to have you back on again sometime.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed hearing the conversation. It really resonated with me as well, and it was just relieving to be a part of something genuine and just something that I feel for myself too, and I know that others feel too, is comforting.
Well, thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. So I hope that was helpful for you, and thank you for being here today. You can visit HealthyPlace.com for your mental health information, and we have blogs from people who are experiencing mental health conditions and issues, and you'll find a lot you can relate to there. So we'll be back in 2 weeks with another Facebook Live / YouTube Live, and I hope to see you then.